Anatomy and physiology. The nervous system consists of the cell body, extensions that receive and transmit information in the form of electrical to chemical nerve impulses to and from the cell body, dendrites, afferent extensions bring nerve impulses into the cell body, axons, efferent extensions take nerve impulses away from the cell body. Synapses is the space where the two neurons meet, neurotransmitters and myelin. Basic terminology: anterior is towards the front, posterior is towards the back, ventral is towards the abdomen, dorsal is towards the back, superior is towards the top, inferior is towards the bottom, external is towards the outside, internal is towards the inside, proximal is towards the body, distal is away from the body, medial is towards the middle, lateral is towards the side, afferent is towards the nervous system, and efferent is away from the nervous system. The central nervous system has 3 protective shields to prevent injury: bones, a series of 3 layered membranes, the meninges, that completely encase the CNS, and a layer of cerebral spinal fluid, CFS. Central nervous system includes your brain and your spinal cord. The peripheral nervous system are the nerves that emerge from the brain and the spinal cord to innervate the rest of the body. There are 12 pairs from the brain called cranial nerves, 31 pairs from the spinal cord that are called spinal nerves. The brain. There's the brain stem. It serves as a conduit between the rest of the brain and the spinal cord. The cerebellum regulates the motor and muscle activity, including coordination of motor movements. The cerebrum governs thinking, problem solving, planning, creating, and rationalizing. It is the largest of the 3 divisions. The cerebrum in detail. It consists of 2 mirror image hemispheres separated by a longitude fissure. The corpus callosum. Each hemisphere contains 4 lobes: frontal, temporal, parietal, and occipital. It's hard to do because I'm sick. Organizational principles of the human brain: interconnectedness, hierarchy, specialization, plasticity. Critical period includes sensory learning, sensory motor output, and stabilization. Contralaterally in the brain. Contralateral organization describes the architectural organization whereby bodily senses and functions are processed in the opposite side of the brain. Nearly all of the human sensory systems exhibit contralateral representation. Speech and language in the human brain. The key centers involve communication. The Broca's involving communication include Broca's area, Heschel's gyrus, and Wernicke's area. The peripheral nervous system is the system of nerves connected to the brainstem and spinal cord. It carries sensory information to the CNS, central nervous system, and motor commands away from the CNS. It controls both voluntary and involuntary activities and consists of cranial nerves and spinal nerves. The 7 cranial nerves are important for communication include trigeminal, facial, acoustic, glossopharyngeal, vagus, accessory, and hypoglossal. Anatomy and physiology of speech. Production of spoken language involves the complex interaction of three interrelated systems of human anatomy and physiology, including respiration, phonation, and articulation. Respiration is a system of the body that controls breathing. Major organs are the lungs. It's divided into the upper and lower respiratory systems. The lower is the lungs, bronchi, alveoli, housed by the thorax, the skeleton of the chest. Upper is the trachea, the larynx, and the oral and nasal cavities. The muscles of the respiration are primary and secondary. Primary for quiet, restful breathing, diaphragm and intercostals. Secondary, accessory, active force inspiration, singing, yelling. Work with the primary muscles. Expiration, so that's for inspiration. Expiration, muscles can be divided into primary and secondary. Expiration during quiet, restful breathing is a passive act that involves the elastic recoil of the muscles after a period of constriction. External intercostals and diaphragm recoil into a relaxed state. Respiration for breathing versus for speaking differs in that more air is inhaled and then exhaled for speech respiration than for passive respiration. Speech respiration differs from passive respiration in the ratio of inhalation to acceleration and in respiratory cycle. For breathing is about 40% inhalation and 60% exhalation. During speech, it's about 10% inhalation and 90% exhalation. Inhalation-exhalation process involved in speech is subject to greater voluntary control than the process involved in normal breathing. Passive respiration is controlled reflexivity. Phonation. The phonation system takes the energy that is sent upward from the lungs and further modulates the airflow to convert the energy into sound. Key structures include your pharynx, your trachea, and your larynx. The pharynx is a mucosa-lined muscular tube that runs from the nasal cavity through the rear of the oral cavity to the entrance of the larynx and the esophagus. It's divided into three sections. Nasopharynx, which is posterior continuation of the nasal cavity. Oropharynx is your throat, the length of the pharynx that connects with the oral cavity. And laryngopharynx is the most inferior portion. Trachea is the cartilaginous, I can't say that, tube that runs from the oral cavity down into the lungs where it separates into two bronchi. The principal function is to transport air between the environment and the lungs. It is not the esophagus, which sits behind the trachea and transport food and water from the oral cavity to the stomach. Stop. The larynx is the cartilaginous ox that sits at the front of the neck on top of the trachea. The primary function is to protect the trachea by keeping out everything but air. With the larynx are the vocal folds, which close tightly to prevent foreign muscle substances from descending into the trachea. They also vibrate to produce voice. The larynx is suspended from the hyoid bone. This motherfucker, dude. Oh, sorry. Horseshoe-shaped bone that floats horizontally at the base of the neck, made up of cartilages that are connected through muscle ligaments, one cricoid, one thyroid, two arytenoid, and one epiglottis, all cartilages. Extrinsic and intrinsic muscles of the larynx. Extrinsic are the suprahyoids, run from the larynx to the region superior of the hyoid bone. Laryngeal elevators, diastrachus, stylohyoid, geniohyoid, and mylohyoid. Okay. Infrahyoids run from the larynx to the region below the hyoid bone. Laryngeal depressors, omohyoid, sternohyoid, thyrohyoid. Oh my God. The intrinsics, cricothyroid, posterior cricoarytenoid, paired. Lateral cricoarytenoid, paired. Arytenoid, paired. Thyroidenoid, vocalist. The cricothyroid, oh wow, this is getting even better, runs between the front of the cricoid cartilage to the posterior part of the thyroid cartilage. Contracts to lengthen the vocal cords. Posterior cricoarytenoids run from the front of the cricoid cartilage to insert into the back of each of the arytenoid cartilages. They contract to pull the arytenoid cartilages apart, which opens the vocal folds. Lateral cricoarytenoids run from the sides of the cricoid cartilages into the front of the arytenoid cartilages. They contract to pull the arytenoid cartilages together, which closes the vocal cords. The arytenoids run between the two arytenoid cartilages, forming a sort of cross as each member of the pair run from one base of the cartilage to the apex of the other. They also help to close the vocal cords, particularly in the back. The thyroid arytenoids comprise a broad but thin set of small muscles that run from the front of the thyroid cartilage to insert into the base of the arytenoid cartilage. It helps to shorten and relax the vocal cords as well as bring the two vocal cords together for voicing. The vocal folds stretch horizontally from arytenoid cartilages in the back of the thyroid cartilage to the front. There are two thin sheets of tissue connected on their outer edge to the inside of the thyroid cartilage. The vocal folds and speaking. Voice is a creation of sound by vocal cord vibration. When air is exhaled from the lungs and sent up through the larynx, the vocal cords can be set into rapid vibration to create your voice. The phonatory system is comprised of your larynx, pharynx, and trachea. Three important roles in speech form the essential pathway for the energy supply of speech. They channel the air from lungs into the oral and nasal cavities. That was the first one. Here's the second one. The vocal cords in the larynx turn the airflow into voice through their vibration. 3. The pharynx provides a resonating chamber for the airflow. Articulation is the act of manipulating the airflow submitted in the phonatory cyst to create a highly precise speech sound. In English, there are speech sounds called phonemes. The chief articulators include the mandala, lips, teeth, hard and soft palates, and tongue. Anatomy and physiology of hearing. The human ear has 3 distinct sections: outer ear, middle ear, and inner ear. The outer ear is the outermost portion of the human ear, consists of your auricle, external auditory channel, and tympanic membrane. Serves as the entry point into humans' hearing apparatus for sound waves. It's a funnel shape that helps gather sounds and waves to channel them inward. The outer ear is in pinea, or the auricle pinea, Visible outer portion consists of cartilage covered by skin. Key parts include your earlobe, tragus, triangular, and helix outer body of the auricle. External auditory channel opens from the auricle. No role is to conduct sound waves inward and towards the brain. The thymatic membrane, a transition. The internal auditory channel ends at the thymatic membrane, which is a very thin concave membrane that stretches across the bony portion of the external auditory canal. Yeah. The thymatic membrane serves as a miniature loudspeaker. As sound waves travel through the EAC, they hit the TM, which is highly sensitive to pressure, and its vibration replicates the auditory information carried in one sound wave. The middle ear, the TM, serves as the boundary between the outer ear and the middle ear. The middle ear is air-filled bony cavity, sometimes called thymatic cavity. The Escherichian tube runs from the middle ear to the pharynx and serves as a pressure equalizing tube, PET, for the middle ear space. It holds the three smallest bones in the human body, the maculus, the incus, and the stapes. The middle ear bones. The malleus, first of the three bones. It looks like a hammer. The handle of the malleus is attached to the inside of the TM, and the head is attached to the second bone, the incus. The incus is attached to the stapes. The stapes are shaped like the stirrup, and the footplate of the stirrup sits inside the window of the inner ear's vestibule called the oval window. The inner ear houses the cochlea. It's fluid-filled cavity that resides deep inside the temporal bone behind the eye socket. It consists of complex system of canal, I don't know that fucking word, and cavities, three major cavities, semicircular, and cochlea. The inner ear in more detail. Vestibule, the central portion of entryway in the inner ear that sits between the cochlea and the semicircular canals. The semicircular canals open off one side of the vestibule and consist of three channel systems that serve as the organs of balance. Cochlea opens up off the other side of the vestibule and consists of single fluid-filled canal that serves as the organ of hearing. It's shaped like a snail. Along the inner length of the cochlea sits the basilar membrane, which consists of the organ corti, long rows of hair cells that together form the hearing organ. How the auditory information is transported from the middle ear to the organ of the corti in small steps. When the ossicular chain vibrates, the footplate of the stapes vibrate in and out of the oval window. On the other side of the oval window is the fluid-filled vestibule. The in and the out movements of the stapes set the fluid in motion. The fluid waves carry the auditory information transported by the motion of the stapes, now hydraulic energy, into the cochlea. The fluid waves moving through the cochlea stimulate the basilar membrane. The vibrations of the basilar membrane in turn stimulate the hair cells in the organ of the corti. The hair cells interpret the auditory information and turn that information into neural energy that is transported from the cochlea along the auditory nerve to the brain. The auditory nerve. The auditory information carried in the fluid movings of the cochlea is interpreted by the hairs of the organ of the corti. These hairs are connected to a bundle or nerve fibers fibers, auditory nerves that exist in the cochlea and travel to the brain, part of the CNV. Transport the auditory information now in the form of neutral energy from the cochlea to the brain stem, the midbrain, and finally to the cerebellum. Auditory brain center. The temporal lobe contains the auditory cortex with both the left and right hemispheres. Auditory cortex processes incoming auditory information that includes both speech and non-speech. Anatomy and physiology of swallowing. When gluten, the act of swallowing, is inefficient or unsafe, a disorder of swallowing is present called dysphagia. The chief articulators, maxilla, mandible, lips, teeth, hard, soft palates, tongue, are all essential to swallowing. Penetration, when food or drink enters the laryngeal area. Aspiration, when food or drink gets beyond the laryngeal into the lungs. 3 phases of swallowing. The oral phase, which has the oral preparatory stage and the oral transport stage, the pharyngeal phase, and the esophageal phase. The oral phase, bolus, is manipulated and modified into a form that can be readily transported through the pharynx and esophagus to the stomach. Preparation often requires mastication. Takes about 1 second. Through age, disease, and various disorders can slow the swallowing process. The tongue is the major player. There's 2 stages, the oral preparatory and the oral transport. The oral preparatory stage consists of 2 activities: bolus preparation and bolus replacement. Bolus preparation is needed for any food item that is required reduction of more transportable and digestible. The process: when the bolus enters the oral cavity, lips and jaws open and then close quickly. Lips are held together tightly by creating a pressure vacuum for easy movement and control. At the same time, the soft palate descends to make contact with the rear of the tongue. The tongue base seals off the oral cavity from the nasal passage so that the person can breathe while masticating. Also keeps the bolus from exiting the oral cavity during its preparation. The oral transport stage begins once the bolus is fully prepared for propulsion. For the swallow, it must be safely executed. Breathing must stop. 4 essential acts in the initiation of a swallow. Soft palate elevates, closing off the nasal cavity. Lips contract, creating a tight oral seal. Tongue blade drops with the bolus descending slightly back into the oral cavity. The tongue tip rises to press against the hard palate. Pharyngeal phase begins when the bolus reaches the tonsils, which are the ring tissue around the entrance of the pharynx from the oral cavity. At this time, the epiglottis drops to protect the seal and seal the larynx from the bolus. The muscles lining the pharynx constrict during this phase to propel the bolus to the entrance of the esophagus. It lasts about 8 seconds. The esophageal phase is the esophagus is a long tube of muscles that runs from the bottom of the pharynx to the entrance of the stomach. Features 2 sphincter muscles, one at the upper end and one at the lower end. It aids in propelling the bolus through the esophagus via a series of involuntary wave-like constriction called peristalsis.